you know, I have two different mics there. Sorry for that. Yeah. So, well, I think you have understood that I'm a doctoral researcher and master executive coach with Apex from the presentation, though I didn't get the presentation in Chinese, of course. Yeah. But what a leadership development training coach is, I hope will be clear in the end of this presentation. And as the use of the number 4 is because earlier on I was doing a research presentation at the EMCC research conference in 2017 in London that I called Leadership Training 3.0. But since then, a lot happened through the practice and, of course, through the research, where I actually start to understand more and more what I actually am doing. Because sitting down, reflecting, and collecting the data and from the participants in the program and their co-workers, paint a picture that makes it actually more clear what I am doing during the programs. And as you can see, I've had different roles in EMCC during the year, also assessor. But I've been doing coaching since 1990. And as I come from a sport psychology background, I've coached athletes in a number of sports, as well as Swedish national teams. I've also been coaching and training sports coaches in coaching leadership, from local clubs to national teams. As the results were quite good, I started to get questions about doing work with different businesses as well as public sector organizations. And in 1998, my research adventure started at the University of Stockholm in sociology. And we will have a look at some of the outcomes of this research project on coaching leadership, as the results were quite interesting. But the key points of today's webinar is, first, we will have a look at executive leadership coaching in practice from the 1990s to what happened during a group coaching workshop in 1999 that led me to do research later in the same organization that I did that group coaching. And I will present the results of coaching leadership outcomes from the research done from the year 2000 until 2011. And this research then led to some publication where coaching leadership and coaching culture was defined. But today, I ask myself, what's the next step in coaching? I personally think professionalization and evidence-based is central, and what we can accomplish through leadership training through coaching. And lastly, we will look at some outcomes of a leadership development training program where coaching is essential. I will also present some of the research data we have gathered, and of course, we will end with a Q&A. So let's see what executive leadership coaching in practice looked like from 1990. It's interesting that many management organizational consultants often turn into executive and leadership coaches. And the coaching they did is often a mix of individual and team coaching, as well as group coaching and leadership training. And that is how it has been for me for almost 35 years as a professional coach. And my focus in coaching has always been on leaders' mindset, behaviors, and strategies, and how leaders can evolve and develop both the leadership and their organizations. And that's always something I've followed up in different ways, and also that's what my research has been about all this time. And to achieve these changes in mindset, behaviors, and strategies, to help them to actually develop leadership and their organizations, I do both individual coaching, team coaching, group coaching, leader and leadership development training. But as we know, individual coaching is, in many cases, and was for a long time, the singular focus of the coaching community. But then supervision entered the scene. And I think firstly through Apex and then EMCC. About 10 years back, I asked why the team coaching hours were not counted in accreditation. And in recent years, team coaching has grown and been acknowledged. And even today, several of the coaching bodies have team coaching accreditation. But my question today is, why are the group coaching hours not counted in accreditations? As well as a coaching done during leadership development training. But these are things I will come back to later in the end of the presentation. Because I think many professional coaches are doing all 4 of these. That is, especially the leadership coaches, business coaches, executive coaches that has a background in management or management consultancies. During the year, most of my bigger coaching assignment has been with international corporations through contacts with other coaching businesses. So I've been an associate to some of the bigger UK-based coaching consultancies, but also through EMCC. And I remember one case where I actually learned to know a French guy at the Paris conference, and later on he took contact, and I did work for a year with different auto dealerships in and around Sweden. And of course, I get some jobs from work I've done in sports with other organizations. And when someone I've worked with start to work in another business. One example is a sales manager where I did leadership coaching individually during 4 to 5 months. And he actually increased sales with almost 80% during that time. And then when he later changed work and he brought me with him into the new organization, and we did coach the lead with all members of the management team. And that is a special story that I will come back to, because it's a success story and a fail story at the same time, because all training does not end exactly where I wanted it to end, but most actually do. So, but it's also interesting to share, what might be the differences from a successful training and a not so successful training. Another example was a learning experience during a team coaching session I did some 20 years back. I was actually at the team coaching event together with the management team, and during that event in the afternoon, the marketing manager had his own agenda. He disturbed the team coaching session, and I actually asked the CEO for a break and went outside with the CEO and said, okay, it's your decision. You have to call this out and either tell him to take his agenda to another meeting, or you do it here today. But if you choose to do that, I will just sit and observe. And he chose to actually give the marketing manager the floor. And I stayed on as an observer to be able to come back to what happened and use that in the team coaching the day after. I think maybe that was the right thing to do at that time, but it was also learning lessons that we sometimes, when things happen that we can't control, we need sometimes to take a break and see, okay, where are we going with this? And sometimes maybe we should challenge that manager and get him on track on the team coaching session at the time. But I think at that moment, in that situation, we got away quite well, and especially as we had some learning from the experience the day after. Well, one conclusion that I've done through work, especially together with other coaching consultants, is when we have combined individual coaching, possibly team coaching, and leadership training workshops. And that is quite interesting, as they then actually start to learn some of the coaching skills, both individually and with their teams and on a day-to-day basis. And when we have done the design of the programs with the companies this way, the best outcomes has been reached. Bridging the gap between research and practice, as you can hear, I hope, has been my intent from the start and was my mission as Vice President of Research in EMCC Global. This is still the aim and purpose of my work and research. To me, this means to base all my work on research evidence from different areas of research as performance and coaching psychology, sociology, organizational and leadership theories, and more. And it has always been useful to base my coaching on models and frameworks from research. As I did when I did a typical group coaching workshop in 1999. And as you can see on the slide, I have put up some of the questions that I use. The participants were people from different departments and teams. They were managers and team leaders. And as I designed the workshop, I used a group coaching method, and the main content of the day consisted of these questions, or these Socratic questions, you can say, for the participants to reflect on and try to find answers to. One of the first questions was, what are your goals as leaders? And their answer was to see to it that the workforce have all the resources needed to do a very good job. And their answers are quite interesting, as in the answer, what is important for the teams to contribute to be productive. They said that they are willing to cooperate, are open to each other's ideas, and are willing to listen to each other, which led to a follow-up question that was, what does that mean for you as leaders? And as you can imagine, I hope they saw that they also needed to listen and were willing to do so on the ideas that come out of the meetings. And most central, maybe, how should the leader act or behave in his or her group or team? And when they said being a catalyst through coaching and being a role model, okay, what do you mean by being a catalyst through coaching? I asked. We need to involve people in problem solving and continuous improvements by asking questions and listen to their ideas. I think you can hear the message that came out of that meeting was quite interesting. We also then practiced some coaching skills on how to use what, how, where, and when, using Socratic open-ended questions. And these reflections, ideas, and thoughts that were formulated by the participants was very interesting. Actually, they were so interesting to the degree that a couple of years later, I came back to do some research to see what actually came out of the ideas and thoughts of the participants. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find evidence to if our workshop contributed to the change in the organization, as other management consultants were doing work at the factory at the same time. And internal projects, of course, also played a big role. They were working on lean, but one of the conclusions from the research is that to be able to be successful with lean, you have to start by training leaders in coaching, because the ideas must come from the floor and grow up through the organization. Still, the outcomes of the developmental process initiated at the company in 1999 that I were able to research in 2001 and 2011 is impressive, to say the least. And on the next slide, you can see it became evident that Model-Tech, that's not the real name of the company, as you might know, both in research and in coaching. Our code of ethics tells us to actually don't disclose who you're working with. And I think that's important to do, even though in some cases companies want us as a researcher to actually tell people about the good results. And as you can see, these results are convincing, both if you look at productivity, sick leave, and employee turnover. But the insights that led to these results tells us why the improvements at Model-Tech were possible to achieve. First of all, leaders at Model-Tech came to the conclusion that the assemblers have the experience and therefore best knowledge of how to improve their work. We should ask them for their ideas. Another secret is that we agree on solutions together. And yet another respondent said, that is where the strength lies in the entire project. The teams themselves have created their workplace. Instead of someone else thinking, this is how you should work, they have together figured out what's the best way. And in 2011, another respondent said, we're getting around 200 improvement proposals per week, and more than 90% of the proposals are carried out, most often by the teams themselves. And that's quite interesting. And doing observation on the floor in that factory was also quite impressive. I really saw how people were engaging in dialogue on the floor on a daily basis. And let's look at the results, because this is quite interesting. And the reason why they started this process from the start was that the productivity at the factory that I did the research on that's just a small part of this global organization, and they have spread this leadership, the coaching approach to leading, all around the globe in all their factories. But my research was focusing on one of the factories and the assembly line. And as productivity was too low, it was too costly. So they were thinking about actually moving the assembly line to another country. But with the help of some workshops done in 1999 and their own internal projects, they decided to try to find another way to go forward. And this led to, in the first year, that they made or assembled 37 vehicles per day in 2000, and 1 year later, 43 vehicles, the same workforce. And as you can see, sick leave halved from 9% to 4.5% at the same time. And employee turnover, the numbers on that in the diagram is very strong. Earlier it was 35% and it went down to 6%. Just in that assembly factory, it was worth around $6 million the first year in savings. And as you can see, 10 years later, there are more people on the workforce, there are 300 more, and they actually said from the start that, okay, if we get too efficient in our work, some of us will lose the job. But as you can see, it was the opposite. Instead, 300 more people got a job on that factory. And even though they didn't double the workforce, they almost double the productivity during those next 10 years. And as you can see, sick leave decreased even more, as well as the employee turnover. And the important conclusion here is that increases in productivity can be achieved in parallel with decreases in sick leave and employee turnover when coaching leadership or a coaching culture emerges in an organization. And I think that's proof of that improved efficiency and health can go hand in hand. And looking at the research side of this, Decky and Ryan's self-determination theory explains possibly very much why this happens, because the motivational theory that they have been working on in 30 years is quite interesting, and it's very much about creating some sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness in the teams. And to do that, they say, actually Stone, Decky, and Ryan wrote a very interesting paper in 2009 to create a SDT, a self-determination theory climate. You need to ask open-ended questions, present choices, and listen. And actually, I think you can hear that what they're saying, you need to coach the individuals and the team. But Haberman's theory of communicative action was also presented in a book in 2005 that I called Coachology, where I presented more of this research. And in that book, Coachology, Team Cohesion, Passion and Profits, and the article Creating a Coaching Culture, published by EMCC's International Journal of Mentoring and Coaching in 2014. Definitions of what coaching leadership and what a coaching culture is has been presented. In the latter case, especially what the challenge is to be able to start to build a coaching culture might be. Because as we all know, there are not coaching cultures in every organization, and it might not be possible, and maybe it's not even suitable for all organizations. The only thing I can conclude is what I've seen from my research is that it's very successful in the organizations, and they're very different type of industries. And I know in the coaching community, many companies, coaching training companies, they think that individual coaching equals a coaching culture or coaching leadership. But actually, coaching leadership includes both individual, team, and group coaching, as I've been mentioning before. But most of all, maybe, and most important, is to have a coaching approach to leadership on a day-to-day basis. And then the creating of a coaching culture might become true. And it's fascinating to do observation in the coaching culture. You know, you can see people having a meeting in a corridor for 5 minutes, solving a problem that you can see other companies have a number of 1-hour meetings before they actually get to a solution. But let's go into maybe the next steps of coaching in businesses. Because I ask myself, what is the next step? And especially, what is the evolution of leadership coaching, or where does it need to go? And in the review of research, I have seen a lot of interesting statements from professors around the world. And firstly, about leadership development programs from professors like David Day, Peter Hawkins, who's quite known in the EMCC community, and Barbara Kellerman from Harvard. They are quite critical. And Professor Kellerman states in an interview that there is precious little evidence that the leadership industry has in any meaningful, measurable way benefited society. But lucky for us as coaches is at the same time, the Institute of Coaching has shown that over 70% of leaders being coached improve in work performance and communications with a 5 to 7 times return on investment. Yeah, and that's of course great. But as traditional leadership development programs are inefficient and leadership coaching is, but only to 70% of the leaders that actually improve in their leadership. I think it's time for the next step of the leadership coaching evolution. But first, I think we need to be rigorous about having an evidence base. As I write on the slide, if you construct a house, it must withstand the load of the structure. Thus, an evidence-based approach is crucial, but the art is also important, as the design will make the house attractive and in demand on the market. And I think this goes as well for coaching, and evidence-based coaching and training also need a rigorous evidence-based body of knowledge, or there could be a risk to do harm rather than help. And actually, there's some schools in the coaching community that are more made up, and there are actually examples of when coaches have done harm, not help their clients or coachees. But this also means that there are consequences to consider to achieve proper professionalization. And the late David Gray, professor in the UK, wrote a lot about that. And we had some discussions some years back. And one thing that we didn't agree on, but that we discussed, was that the different orientation of coachings need different knowledge, backgrounds, and education. Because if you're a leadership coach, you need to know about leadership theory and organizational theory. But if you're a health or life coach, your knowledge should be in the field of health and life. Because if you don't have a broader knowledge and deeper knowledge in the area you're coaching in, you might not be able to ask the right questions to challenge the coachee to actually develop. And professionalization also means that actually master or professional coaches need a university degree. And to some extent, EMCC understands that, because if you look at the EQA master level, you need to get approved as a provider to have 1,800 hours, and that's the same as in a master program. But the focus needs to be on training and reflection, much more than it is usually in universities. And that's the lesson the UK universities who applied for an EQA on the master level learned. So they had to change the program and add training. And for Apex, where I'm a master executive coach today, actually you need a master's in a relevant subject, and you need coaching skills to be approved, to be accredited. But let's look now at the possible next step in form of leadership development training program. Built on a semi-structured evidence base that can lead to self-insights, learning, and behavior improvements of leaders, and that actually can be measured on the organizational level, as in decreases in levels of sick leave, employee turnover, and in parallel increases in productivity, creativity, innovation, a number of improvements, as in the case of model tech that I presented. So why do I propose this combination, leadership? Because leader development and leadership development are two different things. And that is something that our research is now putting together. We have done some putting together evidence on. We've gone through the research, we reviewed it, and we've done a mixed method follow-up of several years of leadership development training in different organizations. Our LLDT program is oriented toward developing coaching leader behaviors that emerges into coaching leadership in teams, as leadership does not emerge in solitude, but according to several renowned researchers, we need to understand leadership not as something in the hands of singular leaders, but as a collective phenomena. And one of the leading professors in the field, David Day, stated that. And I find that really interesting. So that's why I also talk more about, when we talk about leaders development, we talk about mindset, insights, and creating new leader behaviors. And when they come to the team, when the collective meets in communication, leadership emerges. And has some more reasons to focus on developing coaching behaviors and coaching leadership in an organization. First of all, there's an expectation on managers to coach their co-workers, according to Professor Latham. But most don't, simply because they don't have the skills. Because being able to ask open-ended questions and listening are central in coaching and taking co-workers' ideas and thoughts into consideration is useful in any organization. And because through coaching, the training becomes individualized, and design thinking is also proposed by Professor David Day to be of importance for leaders' development, as design thinking means to involve the leaders themselves in planning their own development. And this also means that we need to have a coaching approach through the whole training program. And last but not least, Professor Bruce Avolio and Barbara Drummey wrote an article last year where they argue that leaders coaching behaviors equals leader maturity. And that's quite interesting coming from Bruce Avolio, who's been involved in leadership research for, I don't know how many years, 30 or 40 maybe. So the challenge in the programs is to coach leaders to develop as individuals, to develop their mindset, strategies, and behaviors simultaneously. But the combination is actually possible, and that's what the research says. And at the University of Wales, Trinity St. Davis, we are now collecting the data from this research, and what we have considered designing the program is to base the program solely on evidence to actually get the transfer of training. And it should actually be part of an organization's strategic plan. And that's something I try to check with the organizations I work with, or at least influence them to put it into the strategic plan. Soft skills training, that is coaching skills training, is more efficient actually than most other sorts of training. Space training, the program needs to be running for at least 3 to 4 months, every other week, or at least once a month. And if you do it more seldom, the training should go on, the duration should go on for a longer time. It should include multiple methods, information or education is less important than deliberate, realistic skills practice with feedback and reflections. And that's the central part in most coaching training programs. Yeah, it's quite important to have some kind of communities of practice in the company so you get support for actually using your new learned skills on the job, and then to actually evaluate the program as such. Yeah, and during the program, I actually use coaching. I coach the group or the team, depending on who are the participant. If it's a management team, it becomes team coaching. If it's a mixed group of people, it becomes group coaching. And they then do exercises from the beginning, quite simple exercises. But already during model 2 or 3, the exercises becomes real coaching sessions. And they also get, of course, some simple assignments from the beginning, as just ask 3 open-ended questions per day at your workplace. And during the program time, the homework gets more complex, and they work on subjects as planning, problem solving, decision making, strategic change management, how to use coaching in performance appraisals, leading meetings, negotiations, and conflict management. Yeah, and just to be clear, actually the program has been run both on Zoom and live. The original program are 10 models and takes around 10 months, but I've run 6 model versions as well. And the last year, actually, I've tried to pressure test the program and only done 4 models over 4 months to see if we can reach the same results. And actually, in this last work, it seems that it works, but maybe because most of the coaches in that group were or are working in a organization where they actually have created a coaching culture already. And well, I mentioned a case before that was both successful and not. And the difference were because in one of the factories of that company, mechanical industry, they have created a fully coaching culture, but in the other, the manager of that place is a control freak, yeah, and he wasn't able to develop his skills in asking questions, so he held back his crew at his factory. And there's some interesting observations done where the competency of the people in the factory actually are not at the same level as in the one that where they have been able to develop a coaching culture. Well, I also do one thing that is interesting. I do some go and see coaching with people that I have been that's been through the program, and I would say one sticks out because I've been doing this with mechanical industries, pharma, sports clubs, and even actually with a task force. And at one point, I did a go and see coaching with one of their instructors, where they did an exercise, and the exercise was to board a train to take down a gunman. And they got the assignment, and they did the exercise, and they took down the gunman. Observe, this was just an exercise, so it was only paintball guns they used. But afterwards, the instructor sat down and he started to coach them, but there was something missing in the coaching. His questions was good, but they were too, let's say, shallow. So I coached him and I asked him, okay, there's different stages in the exercises. How could you actually go back to parts of it and let the people that did the exercise reflect on these, what they did? So he actually, from that Go and See coaching, he took his coaching to the next level and became better at go deeper into the different things and they were experiencing. Okay, let's look a little bit more on the actual outcomes of the leadership development training that have come out of the research project at University of Wales, where I get real good support and challenge by the professors Annette Fillery-Travis and Stephen Palmer, who are two names in the coaching community that's really of interest. Annette Fillery-Travis got a lifetime award by the Coaching at Work magazine last year, and Stephen Palmer is one of the persons behind getting coaching psychology to be an independent subject under psychology in the UK. But as you can see on the slide, the first statement is quite interesting because that's the unit leader or the department manager who says, in our management team, we have all gone through the program. The discussion climate has improved, but also generally in the workplace, with a greater operational focus and responsibility among employees. And as you can hear, this is important things that has happened and that can be actually measured on the organizational level. And I have some quotes more here from some team leaders, and one is her reflection on preparing for a meeting, where she writes, what kind of meeting conversation is this? What do I want from the meeting? How do I get others to share ideas, solution? What questions do I use? And what I've seen in the Go and See coaching session that I've done with people in that program, that the coaching leader ask about 80 to 90% of the time, they ask questions. And they talk a smaller part of the time, as opposite to studies in Sweden on more common behaviors among managers who talk around 87% of the time of a meeting. And that's a difference, and it creates a difference in engagement of the people in the meeting. And actually last week I did a very interesting Go and See observation and coaching session afterwards. And it was so satisfying to see the calm focus, how the coach looked the coachees in the eye with a slight smile, asked questions and listened very actively, but also shared some information, praise and feedback. And you know, when you do that and you see that they have built their skills to really coach, that is maybe the most satisfying part of working on this. But of course, when they also write what they write, as I've just quoted, and you see the scores on this diagram. As you can see, the first part is earlier on, the respondent thought that the leaders' behaviors during meetings was that most of the people thought their leaders spoke most of the time in the meetings. But after the training, instead of speaking most of the time, the 46.67, that was down to 5%. And instead, they cooperate and coaches the participants in the meeting and that went from 53.3 to 95%. So most of the time, most of the coach leaders in that organization today actually coaches their co-workers. And as you can see, the increases in giving feedback day to day, it was rarely and mostly negative, but today 80% thought that it's constructive, and I also get help to evaluate and feedback myself by the leader coaching me. And as you also can see, the listening to opinions and suggestions went from seldom to 95% are actually listening often or very often. Yeah, and of course, I mean, this is just a taster of the data we have gathered. These are 3 areas in the coworker questionnaire. Actually, we measured 38, and we have loads of interviews and observations to analyze. Well, time runs very fast, and I can just say thank you very much for listening to this quite intense presentation. And as you can see on this slide, if you're interested to contact me, if you're interested in getting certified to actually be a licensee and certified to use the program. And I think it's back to you, Icy, and time for a Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, you may stop sharing the slides.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation about the evolution of coaching and also your insights about the leadership training program. It's very invaluable. And we just saw the comments from the audience, and they showed the positive feedback, and also asked several questions. And my colleagues have helped me collect some of them. And most of them are in Chinese, and we have translated them into English, and I'll put them in the chat. Okay. Let's see the first question. 大家如果有任何问题的话，现在可以提问。非常感谢我们Paul刚才精彩的演讲，他讲了这个教练的一个在过去的这些年他的一个发展，可能从个人教练到团队教练，再到团体教练，然后现在呢有特别也提到了这个领导力教练，然后他们有特别的就是用这个教练4.0的技术，然后去开展这个领导者的培训。那现在大家有什么问题可以尽管问，Paul会在线回答大家的问题。Okay, so first question. What are the differences between team coaching and group coaching?
Yes, actually, the main difference is that a team, like a management team, is a team that works together as a team. And a group might be people from different teams in the same organizations that meet for some reason. Or it can actually, when we talk about the LLDT training program, it could be managers or leaders from different organizations in an open program, and then it becomes a group that meets to train together. So the main difference is where they come from. Actually, what you do when you coach a team and a group, I as a coach might do the same thing, but the subjects and contexts that we discuss and work on might be different.
So in group coaching, the leaders can come from different teams in one organization, or leaders from different organizations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So let's see the second question. In group coaching, how to make leaders feel safe to share their vulnerability, to show their vulnerability.
Yeah.
Especially when they come from different organizations.
Yeah.
The things that mentioned may be sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And this is, of course, very much up to the head coach, in this case, in the training, me, to try to create a very open climate. And of course, the first time I meet a group will be very different from the second and third or fourth time I meet them, because if we do this right and I share some failures and some successes and are open with my own feelings and vulnerability, I can role model them to open up. But it's also, of course, up to every individual. Some people might not actually even enter group coaching session because they're not open to do that. Then they will only discuss things individually. And that's why I mix all these things. So I do some individual coaching, and I especially do the go and see coaching sessions with individual coaching afterwards, because then that's when we can really find what they need to work on. But there's still, even though some people might not share everything in a group session, usually they become more and more safe in that space.
That depends on their own choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very something. It can be very personal. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see the third question. This question is how to create a coaching culture in the company. Can you give an example?
Yes, I can. I mean, there's a lot written on this, and there is my article from 2014 in the that I think you can find as members of EMCC online. There I actually go through all the different steps, but I think the most interesting part is, because that's some of the steps are mechanical. You start by train people in coaching, and then you create the resources of coaching in the organization. But that's not always enough, because as the failure example that I told you about, where one factory actually hasn't been able to create the coaching culture, is because the manager of that place is not open to it, and he has some control issues. So he doesn't let people in, and they don't learn much from each other. So I think, and that's the main point in my article, Creating a Coaching Culture, is that what is needed for an organization to get the insights of the usefulness of creating a coaching culture. Because if that's in place, then it's easy. Then you just start to do the skills training. You learn the techniques, the models, the methods, and you practice your coaching. And the better you get at it, the more you will create a coaching culture in the organization. But when the insights are not there, then that's the tricky question. That's the $10,000 question. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And it very much depends on the individual person, if he's open or she's open to a new perspective on leadership, a modern or post-modern, actually.
So we can see that in coaching, actually, we can encounter various problems, mainly from the human side of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here is a question. If in the coaching, the coachee shows some resistance to the coaching, and what advices could you give?
Yeah. Well, that's that does happen now and then, of course. Usually more in the individual coaching, but I'm quite straightforward in situations like that. So I might just ask, I can sense some resistance from you in our conversation. Could you tell me what that is about? That might work on some. It might not work on everyone. But I think this total openness, just challenging them on the spot on what you see, is definitely one way forward. Another way forward might actually be more defensive, where you actually say, okay, I sense that you are not trusting me fully. Would you like to consult with another coach instead? I mean, that is an option. Of course, that's not an option we will like to have or love to choose, but it's an option.
Yeah, only when the coachee can fully accept that he or she will accept that we will do the coaching, and that the things can move on. Coaching can only be moved with based on trust, like this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Given the time, maybe we have 2 more questions, and this one is how to measure the effect of LLDT program. Are there some metrics?
Yes, I mentioned very briefly that we use a mixed method. And we use a mixed method to triangulate the results from the different methods. So what we have done is the participants write the learning log where they reflect on what they actually learned, what they think is difficult, what's easy, and what's useful, and what came out of it. Then I do the observations and I do some notes, and then I do the interviews after the observations and ask them questions and challenge them on what they thought they were doing, how that actually worked. And then we do the questionnaire that you saw some samples on in the slide, and we actually measure 38 different factors. Some are related to leaders' behaviors, some are how the teams work, some are on learning and cooperation in total in the organization, and some of the questions are on motivation and how co-workers sense their level of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And then we, by gathering data from all these mixed methods, we get very broad data that we can analyze and see, okay, what's what there. And then we also look at the running records, like you saw in the Model Tech version, where we look at sick leave, productivity, employee turnover. So that's, I would say, a very applied approach to research. We really want to understand what does happen, what is the real results, not only for the participants in the program, but for the organization and the teams themselves. And that's also why I titled the book in 2005 already, Coachology, Team Cohesion, Passion, and Profit, because that's what we were looking at, actually.
Yeah, the program is not only for the benefit of leaders, but also for the team and also for the organization. So it's fit for, Thank you. Let's see the last question. How to integrate AI into your research? Have you ever tried that?
I've done some attempts. The thing is that AI is not there yet, I would say. I mean, there, if you want help in doing your review, for example, it will only access most of the mainstream leadership theories. And I'm not that interested in that part. I'm more interested in the critical management and leadership studies. And so if you ask AI for an answer on something specific on a review of leadership, I try that and the answer is not interesting enough. I did want to try to shorten a text, but then we come into security problems because I can't share the text before it's published. So that's the thing. Then on the other hand, maybe from the start, I could have used AI to actually help me to hone the research questions to be stronger and better. But I haven't done it in this research now. I'm still, playing around with AI to see what can it really do. And some researchers said, at the moment, no, it's not really useful for research.
Thank you. Maybe just like a coin has two sides. The AI also, we still need to figure out what it can bring to us and what it can't.
Yeah. And actually, I did have a conversation because my son's friend, he's an AI expert in Sweden and has done plenty of startups. So I asked him, what do you think? Because we did actually have an AI discussion in Apex some months back. And, there's a threat that AI will take over coaching. So I asked this friend, okay, what do you think? And his answer was very simple. No, AI could never replace the human connection. It's just there to help, to complement the coaching. But then actually I did check a AI app yesterday that gives, tries at least to give a service of executive coaching through an AI app. I haven't checked it out yet, but all depends on what is the experience they put into that app. And it might not suit, for example, a leader that wants to use more of a coaching approach in his leadership. So again, it all depends on what do you put in it. I can just give you one example more. That's the GPS. When you use that driving a car in Stockholm, I can see who knows the town and knows the small routes and who's driving by GPS. And as lucky for us who knows the town, the GPS is not programmed with all the small streets. It's there, but it's not really there anyway.
Yeah. I fully agree with you that AI cannot replace human connection. The connection actually, it should be based on our heart, but AI is a machine to some extent.
Yeah. Even if it can learn to read our facial expressions and stuff, it cannot replace the human connection.
Yeah. So thank you for your wonderful presentation today, and thank you for your support for EMCC China. Thank you very much. And after the webinar, I'll email you the feedback from the audience, and you will know how much people have watched our live streaming. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
好，在这里我们 非常感谢破教练刚才给我们带来精彩的分享，有关于教练4.0引领下的领导力重塑之旅。那本场讲座呢，我们也有视频的回放和相应的资料，那大家可以就是关注我们，然后私信我们，然后获得这个资料，还有这个视频的回放。那在这里我们也预告一下我们下期的讲座的直播。那下一期呢是在6月14号的下午5点到6点。那下一次呢是由来自德国的 Carsten Drass 教练，他给我们带来的话题是身处逆境时，那管理者如何转危为机。那相信就是很多的可能我们的企业的不管是领导者管理者，大家都现在在这个经济比较困难的情况下，大家都遇到了各种各样的问题。那如何在我们是面临这样的一个困境的时候，能够把这个我们的危机，然后能够转化成机遇？那如果大家对这个话题感兴趣的话，大家可以点击左上角，然后关注我们，预约这次讲座的直播。好，今天的直播就到这里，感谢大家的观看，我们下期再见，大家晚安。